A janitor's warning stopped a CEO in her tracks, and what happened next turned an entire company upside down. You never expect a single sentence to stop everything in its tracks. But that's exactly what happened outside a busy corporate office in downtown Columbus, Ohio. The sun was high, employees were laughing, checking their phones, and rushing to grab lunch. And then, out of nowhere, a voice cut through the chatter, sharp and urgent. "Don't get in the car!" Heads turned, conversations froze. And right there in the middle of it all stood Deshaun Ellison. The janitor most people barely noticed. His mop bucket was still tipped over on the pavement, soapy water spilling across the concrete. His eyes, wide and locked, weren't on his tools, though. They were fixed on the CEO of the company, Victoria Whitfield. Victoria was known for her poise. She was the kind of woman who walked with purpose, her heels clicking like a metronome, her designer bag swinging just enough to remind people she wasn't like them. Most employees didn't dare interrupt her, but this wasn't about respect. This wasn't about power. This was about danger. She had her hand on the door of her black SUV, her keys already out, when she froze. Deshaun's voice wasn't casual. It wasn't polite. It carried that rare tone of someone who didn't have time to think about politeness, just urgency. Victoria spun around, her eyes narrowing, confused and annoyed at first. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice cutting through the silence. Deshaun didn't blink. He pointed. "Don't get in the car." For a split second, the entire parking lot seemed to hold its breath. Then came the movement, the kind of movement that makes your stomach drop. A man who no one had noticed until that moment stepped out from behind the SUV. His hand was already on the door handle. His eyes darted between Deshaun and Victoria, caught in the act. "Ma'am, step back," Deshaun barked, his voice firmer now. Victoria stumbled backward, her expensive heels clicking awkwardly on the pavement. She wasn't used to being told what to do, especially not like this, but something in Deshaun's tone told her to listen. The man by her SUV hesitated for just a second too long, and that was enough time for security to notice. Two guards who had been standing by the glass doors rushed forward, shouting. The man let go of the handle and bolted, cutting across the lot and disappearing between cars. Gasps filled the air. A secretary dropped her coffee cup. Someone whispered, "What just happened?" Another muttered, "Did he just try to—" Victoria stood there, frozen, her chest rising and falling quickly. She had faced boardrooms of men twice her age, investors with billions of dollars on the line, but in that moment, she felt something she wasn't used to: vulnerability. And the one person who had stopped it from turning into something worse? A man most of the company only saw at night, pushing a cart with cleaning supplies. Deshaun stepped forward cautiously. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice softer now, as if he was speaking to a neighbor and not the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Victoria looked at him differently this time. Not with annoyance, not with dismissal, with something closer to Most people at Whitfield Industries knew Deshaun Ellison only by sight. They saw him late in the evenings, pushing his cart down the marble hallways, headphones in, quietly wiping down the desks that had been cluttered with coffee cups and half-written notes during the day. To them, he was background noise, invisible, replaceable, just another worker in a uniform. But what they didn't know was that Deshaun's story stretched far beyond the walls of that building. He was a single father, raising his 8-year-old daughter, Layla, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Reynoldsburg, just outside Columbus. Every morning, he got her ready for school, packed her lunch, and made sure she never left the house without hearing him say, "Remember, you're stronger than you think." It was his mantra, something he wished someone had told him when he was her age. Life had been tough. He had once dreamed of finishing college, maybe teaching history, his favorite subject. But when Layla's mom walked out, leaving him with a baby and no support, dreams had to be traded for reality. The janitorial job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and it kept the lights on. Meanwhile, Victoria Whitfield's world looked nothing like his. She grew up in Cleveland Heights, in a sprawling home where her father was a prominent attorney and her mother chaired charity galas. After earning her MBA at Stanford, she climbed the corporate ladder at lightning speed, known for her sharp intelligence and even sharper tongue. She didn't just run Whitfield Industries, she was Whitfield Industries. Her office sat on the top floor of the building, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. People said she could negotiate a deal worth millions while scrolling through her phone without breaking a sweat. She carried herself like someone who knew she was always the smartest person in the room. But for all her wealth and status, Victoria had her blind spots. She was used to being admired, feared, or envied, but never warned, never protected, and certainly never by someone in a janitor's uniform. That's why when Deshawn yelled out to her in the parking lot, the entire dynamic between them shifted in seconds. He wasn't invisible anymore. Later that afternoon, word spread fast inside the company cafeteria. Secretaries whispered about it between bites of salad. Account managers huddled by the coffee machines, debating whether the man had been a thief, a stalker, or something worse. Everyone agreed on one thing, though. The janitor had saved the CEO. Meanwhile, Deshawn was back at work, quietly mopping the floor near the elevators as if nothing had happened. That's who he was. He didn't want attention. He just wanted to finish his shift and get home to Layla before she went to bed. But something about that day was different. He could feel eyes following him when he walked down the halls. He overheard his name whispered like a secret. And he knew, deep down, that the woman at the center of it all, Victoria Whitfield, wasn't going to let this incident pass without confronting him directly. And he was right, because not even 24 hours later, she called him into her office, a place he had never dared to step foot in. But what she said to him in that meeting would leave him stunned. It was just after noon the following day when the scene replayed itself in Deshawn's mind. He was back at the front entrance, sweeping up bits of gravel people had tracked in from the parking lot. The glass doors swung open as employees spilled outside, sunglasses on, laughing and checking their phones, ready for lunch. Victoria Whitfield walked out last. Her stride was quick, purposeful, the way she always moved. Her black SUV glistened under the midday sun, parked just a few feet away. Everyone around her was caught up in their own conversations, but Deshawn wasn't. He had learned to notice things most people overlooked. And that's when he saw him. A man in a gray hoodie standing a little too close to Victoria's vehicle. He wasn't fumbling with keys, wasn't checking his phone. He was still, watching, waiting. Deshawn gripped his broom tighter. His heart thumped once, hard. He glanced around. No one else had noticed. Victoria reached into her purse, pulled out her keys, and angled toward the SUV. Deshawn's instincts screamed. He dropped the broom, stepped forward, and shouted, his voice ringing across the lot. "Don't get in the car!" The sound cut through every conversation. Heads turned. Victoria froze mid-step, frowning, clearly irritated. "Excuse me?" she said, raising an eyebrow. Deshawn didn't flinch. He pointed at the SUV. "Don't get in the car." Victoria's hand hovered above the handle. That's when the man in the hoodie shifted. He reached for the door, quick and deliberate. "Hey!" Deshawn barked, taking a step forward. "Back away from the car!" The man's eyes darted, nervous, caught. He hesitated, then yanked on the handle. Locked. He cursed under his breath. Victoria stumbled backward, heels clacking against the pavement. "What is going on?" she demanded, her voice shaky now. Deshawn raised his voice, never taking his eyes off the man. "Security! Over here!" Two guards stationed near the lobby doors bolted across the lot, radios crackling. The man let go of the handle and sprinted, weaving between parked cars. "Stop him!" one of the guards shouted, but the man was fast. In seconds, he was gone, swallowed up by the street beyond the lot. The silence that followed was heavy. People stood frozen with their lunches half open, some recording on their phones. Others whispered, trying to piece together what just happened. Victoria's face was pale, her breathing uneven. She wasn't used to being shaken, not like this. She looked at Deshawn, still standing in front of her SUV like a shield. What did you see?" she asked. Deshawn's chest rose and fell. "I saw him waiting. I don't know what his plan was, but it wasn't good. You were about to walk right into it." Victoria swallowed hard. For the first time in a long while, she felt small, like someone else had held the power in a moment that could have gone horribly wrong. "Thank you," she said quietly, almost to herself. Deshawn nodded once. "I couldn't let it happen." The guards returned, slightly out of breath, radios still buzzing. "We're calling CPD right now," one of them told Victoria. "We'll review the cameras, see if we can get a clear image." She just nodded, distracted, still staring at Deshawn. Employees began murmuring, some too loudly. Did the janitor just save? Back inside the glass doors of Whitfield Industries, the air felt different. Conversations that usually centered on quarterly reports or weekend plans had shifted to one thing only: what had just happened in the parking lot. By the time Deshawn returned to the lobby with his broom and bucket, whispers were bouncing off every polished surface. A pair of junior analysts stood by the elevators, one saying she was seconds away from getting in, seconds. The other shook his head, and it was him, out of all people, to stop it. Deshawn kept his eyes down, pushing his cart toward the janitor's closet. He wasn't in the mood for stares or small talk, but stares followed him anyway. Near the reception desk, a woman with a headset pressed close to her coworker. I heard he shouted at her. At her. Can you imagine yelling at Victoria Whitfield like that? Her coworker leaned in. Yeah, but he saved her life. That's different. Still, she whispered, if it were me, I'd be packing my things. CEOs don't like being told what to do. Deshawn closed the closet door behind him, exhaling as he leaned against the wall. He wasn't scared for his job, at least not yet. But he knew how things worked in places like this. When you wore a uniform with someone else's name stitched on the chest, you didn't usually come out looking like the hero. Meanwhile, upstairs on the 12th floor, Victoria was pacing her office. Her assistant Holly stood by the desk, clutching a folder. Ma'am, security already called Columbus PD. They're reviewing the footage. They'll contact you once they know more. Victoria pressed a hand to her temple. And the man? Gone. No trace yet. He moved too fast. She turned toward the massive windows overlooking downtown. The city looked calm, indifferent. She wasn't calm. For the first time in years, she had felt helpless, seconds from danger she hadn't even noticed. And the one person who had seen it, who had stopped it, was the janitor whose name she didn't even know. Victoria whispered, almost to herself, "Who is he?" Downstairs, as Deshawn stepped back into the hallway, he ran straight into one of the accountants, a man named Greg. Greg gave him a long look before smirking. "Didn't think you had it in you," he said. Deshawn frowned. "What do you mean?" "You know," Greg shrugged. "Standing up like that. Thought guys like you just, cleaned up after us." Deshawn's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. He'd dealt with men like Greg his whole life, the kind who measured worth by job titles and paychecks. Instead of answering, he simply wheeled his cart down the hall. At that very moment, Holly stepped off the elevator, scanning the lobby. When her eyes landed on him, she walked over. "Mr. Ellison?" she asked, checking her notes. He nodded cautiously. The elevator ride up to the 12th floor felt longer than it should have. Deshawn stood in the back corner, his mop bucket and cart left behind downstairs. Holly tapped her pen against the folder she carried, eyes forward, silent. When the doors opened, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The 12th floor wasn't like the others. Plush carpeting replaced polished tile, artwork hung on the walls, and the air smelled faintly of expensive cologne. People in tailored suits walked briskly, but their eyes flicked toward Deshawn, as if wondering what he was doing there. Holly led him to a pair of tall glass doors at the end of the hall. She knocked once, then cracked them open. "He's here, Ms. Whitfield." "Send him in," came the voice from inside, firm, collected. Deshawn stepped forward. The office swallowed him whole. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a sleek mahogany desk, bookshelves lined with awards and framed photos. Behind it all stood Victoria Whitfield, her posture perfect, her tailored navy dress spotless. For a moment, neither spoke. She studied him the way an investor might study a proposal, carefully, with measured curiosity. Finally, she said, "You're the man who shouted at me yesterday." Deshawn cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am, Deshawn Ellison." "You realize," she said slowly, "no one ever yells at me like that." He gave a faint half smile. "I figured I'd only get one chance to stop you from walking into something bad. Didn't have time to worry about manners." Her lips twitched, just slightly, almost like she was amused. But then her expression hardened. "Tell me what you saw." Deshawn recounted the moment, the man by the SUV, the way he waited, the way his hand moved to the door. His words were simple, direct. He didn't dress it up. When he finished, Victoria leaned back against the edge of her desk, arms crossed. "So you trusted your instincts?" "I trusted what I saw," Deshawn replied, "and I trusted that if I kept quiet, something worse would happen." The room was quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of traffic below. Finally, Victoria asked, "Do you always pay that much attention to what's happening around you?" Deshawn hesitated, then nodded. "When you've had the life I've had, you don't get the luxury of looking away. You notice things. You have to. Her eyes softened, just for a second, before sharpening again. I owe you a thank you, she admitted, but I also need you to understand, yelling at me in front of employees isn't something that goes unnoticed. People are talking. I'm sure they are, Deshawn said, but if I had to do it again, I'd do it the same way. That answer hung in the air, honest, unapologetic. Victoria tilted her head, studying him like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Most people in her orbit bent under pressure, eager to please, eager to impress. This man wasn't trying to impress her at all. Do you know what's happening downstairs right now? She asked. Deshawn shook his head. Half the building is gossiping about you, she said. Some think you're a hero. Others think you crossed. By the next morning, Whitfield Industries felt more like a high school cafeteria than a Fortune 500 company. Gossip clung to every corner of the building. In the break room, a group of interns huddled around the vending machine, whispering, I heard the janitor practically saved her life. Saved her? Or just yelled at her? Big difference. No, I swear, security said he scared the guy off. The CEO owes him like everything. Across the hall, two executives carried their salads to a table, lowering their voices as they sat down. It's ridiculous. Now the staff thinks he's some kind of hero. Better than them thinking she was careless enough to almost get attacked in broad daylight. The first man snorted. Trust me, she won't like that either. Everywhere Deshawn went, conversations hushed, heads turned. Some people smiled at him, others looked him over with suspicion, like he had stepped out of place. On the 10th floor, one of the analysts whispered just loud enough for him to hear, Imagine being a janitor and suddenly thinking you're the star of the show. Deshawn didn't answer. He had learned long ago that silence was sometimes the best response. He just kept his mop moving, one hallway after another, but not everyone saw it that way. Later that afternoon, as he cleaned near the HR department, a woman in a navy blazer approached. You're Deshawn, right? She asked. He nodded cautiously. I just wanted to say thank you. Not everyone would have spoken up the way you did. He gave a polite smile. Anyone would have. She shook her head. No, that's the thing, they wouldn't. Her words stuck with him. For every snide remark or sideways glance, there were a few who genuinely seemed grateful. It was confusing, being invisible one day and impossible to ignore the next. Upstairs, Victoria listened quietly as her leadership team debated in her office. One executive insisted, Ma'am, you can't make a big deal of this. He's a janitor. Thank him privately, maybe give him a bonus, but don't turn it into a spectacle. Another countered, with all due respect, if word gets out that he saved you and you brushed it off, it'll look terrible. The staff admires him now. If you downplay it, you risk losing their trust. Victoria didn't respond right away. She simply looked out the window, the city sprawling beneath her. She remembered the sound of his voice, sharp and commanding. Don't get in the car. She remembered how quickly he reacted when no one else did. She wasn't the type to be swayed by gossip, but she wasn't blind either. Something about this wasn't simple. Downstairs, Deshawn finished his shift in silence, pushing his cart toward the service elevator. He knew the company's eyes were on him now, waiting to see what would happen. And he had no idea that Victoria Whitfield had already made her choice. Because while the building gossiped and speculated, she was preparing to do something no one, least of all Deshawn, expected. 2 days later, the rumor mill reached its peak. By mid-morning, people couldn't stop speculating. Would the CEO ignore the whole thing? Would Deshawn get fired for stepping out of line? Or would he quietly disappear back into obscurity, never mentioned again? No one expected what happened at 11 a.m. The email hit every inbox at Whitfield Industries at the exact same time. All staff are required to attend an emergency meeting in the main conference hall at noon. Confusion spread instantly. Some thought it was a financial crisis. Others thought a major merger was being announced. But when noon came and the entire building packed into the wide conference space on the ground floor, the truth stunned them all. Victoria Whitfield walked to the podium, heels clicking sharply against the floor. The room went silent. She placed her notes on the stand but didn't look down at them once. Instead, her eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on someone in the very back. 2 days ago, she began, her voice steady but carrying weight. Something happened outside this building. Something I cannot and will not ignore. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People leaned forward, eager. She continued. A man attempted to get into my car while I was approaching it. I was seconds away from making a terrible mistake, one that could have ended very badly. And the only reason it didn't is because someone here saw what no one else saw. He didn't hesitate. He didn't care about rank or status. He didn't stop to wonder whether it was his place to speak. He simply acted. All eyes followed hers to the back of the room. Deshawn stood stiffly, trying not to be noticed. Now every pair of eyes was on him. "Mr. Deshawn Ellison," Victoria said clearly, "you saved me, and for that, I am grateful." Gasps spread through the hall. Some people clapped hesitantly, unsure if applause was appropriate. Others whispered furiously. Victoria raised a hand. But gratitude is not enough. What he demonstrated that day, awareness, courage, and responsibility, is exactly what I demand from my leaders. So today, I am announcing something unexpected. Mr. Ellison will no longer be working as a janitor in this building. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria let it linger before continuing. Effective immediately, he will begin training under our security division. If he chooses to accept, he will be on track to a full-time role with benefits and advancement opportunities. Because people like him, people who protect, who notice, who act, deserve more than being overlooked. The room erupted. Some employees clapped loudly now, while others whispered in disbelief. A few sat stone-faced, refusing to react. In the back, Deshawn's mouth opened slightly. He hadn't expected recognition, let alone this. Victoria locked eyes with him. "Mr. Ellison," she said, her voice steady but warm. "This company needs people like you. I need people like you. The question is, will you accept?" All eyes burned into him. When the meeting ended, the crowd spilled back into the hallways, buzzing with conversation. Some shook Deshawn's hand as they passed, murmuring congratulations. Others avoided eye contact, their silence louder than words. Deshawn didn't care about the whispers anymore. What mattered was the phone call he made that evening. He sat in his car, hands still trembling slightly from the whirlwind of the day, and dialed the one number that grounded him. "Daddy?" Layla's small voice came through, filled with the same warmth that always steadied him. "Hey, baby girl," he said, his voice softening. "How was school?" "Good. We had art class today. I painted a butterfly." He smiled, eyes closing for a moment. "That sounds beautiful. I can't wait to see it." There was a pause before she asked, "Did you have a good day at work?" Deshawn chuckled. "You could say that. Something big happened. Daddy's not going to be cleaning floors anymore. I got a new job, a better one where I get to keep people safe." "Really?" Layla gasped. "Like a superhero?" He laughed, shaking his head. "Not quite, sweetheart, but something like that." Her joy poured through the phone. "I'm proud of you, Daddy." Those words hit harder than any applause from the conference hall. That was what it was all for. The long nights, the hard shifts, the moments when he thought he'd never get out of the shadows. The next week, Deshawn began his training with the security division. It wasn't easy. The physical drills were exhausting, the protocols complex, but he threw himself into it with the same determination that had carried him through years of sacrifice. Slowly, he began to shed the role of the invisible janitor and step into something new. Some colleagues welcomed him warmly. The guards who had chased the man in the hoodie treated him like family, often saying, "We're lucky to have you on our team." But others still muttered in corners, convinced he hadn't earned the promotion. One afternoon, Greg cornered him in the cafeteria, sneering. "Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts. People like you don't stay at the top for long." Deshawn didn't flinch. He just looked him in the eye and said, "I don't need the top. I just need to show my daughter what's possible." Then he walked away. Meanwhile, Victoria kept her word. She checked in on him occasionally,